So I'm looking at this photo from our source material, and I have to say, it might be the most depressing office I've ever seen.
It's not exactly the Google campus, is it?
It's the anti-Google campus. I mean, it's this tiny little room. The walls are painted a pale, sort of unassuming light green.
Like a hospital waiting room color?
Exactly. The kind of room where you get bad news. And there's one simple desk, a single monitor, and that's it. Nothing else.
No neon signs, no beanbag chairs.
No colleagues. Just pure, unadulterated silence. It looks like where you'd put an employee for a timeout.
Right. If you showed that to a modern workplace consultant, they'd tell you it's a recipe for psychological disaster. They'd say it just screams isolation and, misery.
Exactly. But here's the thing. The man who works there, he actually calls this the most boring office you will ever see, and he says it with, like, beaming pride.
Oh, wow.
He specifically chose it because it's silent. He doesn't even like high-powered computers because the fans make a humming noise that distracts him.
He needs total silence. He's optimizing for zero sensory input.
And this isn't some struggling freelancer.
Yeah.
This is the workspace of a man who fundamentally changed the technological world as we know it. But to do that, he had to break basically every rule we have about what success is supposed to look like.
And that's the real tension we're getting into today. We are conditioned, almost from birth, to believe success is a social sport.
Right. It's networking, putting yourself out there, open plan offices.
So if you're hiding in a green room, the assumption is you're either failing or you must be deeply unhappy.
But the stories we're looking at today suggest that for some people, that isolation isn't a bug. It's a feature. It's their superpower.
Yeah, we're going to look at the lives of two geniuses, Linus Torvalds and Glenn Gould, and then we're going to unpack the psychological framework that explains it all, called self-determination theory.
A theory that explains why being alone is very, very different from being lonely.
And why, for some people, the most productive thing they can possibly do is just shut the door.
Okay, so let's start with the man in the green room, Linus Torvalds. Even if you don't know his name, you are absolutely using his work right now.
Oh, 100%. If you have an Android phone, you're using his code. If you're on the internet, the servers delivering this to you are probably running on his work, on Linux.
He didn't just write a program. He built the foundation of the modern web.
He really did. But if you look at his background, he seems like the last person you'd expect to lead a global revolution. He was born in Finland in 1969, and the sources call him the classic invisible kid.
He really was. While other kids were playing sports, Linus was just obsessed with math and physics. He wasn't trying to be popular. He was just focused on the logic of things, not people.
There's this one anecdote about him that's just so telling.
The one about his siblings.
Yeah. Apparently, he was so socially awkward that when family friends came over, his siblings had to, give him a briefing beforehand.
Like a pre-game strategy session.
Exactly. They'd have to say, okay, Linus, that's Aunt Mary on the sofa. You need to go over and say hello to her. They literally had to coach him through the absolute basics of just interacting.
But the crucial thing is, he wasn't stressed about it because he was failing at being popular.
Right. He just didn't care. He wasn't looking for social validation. He was looking for interesting problems to solve.
And he found them in the computer.
Of course. For Linus, the computer was a puzzle that always made sense. People are messy, but code is logical. It does what you tell it to do. So he starts writing this kernel, the core of an operating system, basically just for himself.
To scratch his own itch, as they say. He wasn't trying to launch a startup or get rich.
No, he was just playing. And since he didn't have a big circle of friends to show it to, he did something radical. He put it online and made it open source.
We hear that term all the time, but let's just clarify. Normally, software's like a secret recipe, right? Coca-Cola doesn't publish its formula.
Exactly. Microsoft doesn't show you the source code for Windows. You buy the finished thing. Linus did the opposite. He put the code online for free and said, here's what I made. If you can make it better, go for it.
Now, you might think, wait, if he's so antisocial, why invite the entire world into his project?
But that's the genius of it. Open source let him collaborate with thousands of people without ever having to meet them. He could sit in his quiet green room and run a global project just through email.
So it wasn't about avoiding connection. It was about controlling the medium of connection.
Precisely. I mean, think about email. It's asynchronous. You don't have to read body language. You don't have to make eye contact. It strips away all the social friction and just leaves the data. For Linus, that was freedom.
And that freedom led to this massive thing. I mean, Linux generates billions today, but Linus is still in a small room, mostly alone. And when people ask, he says he's happy.
Because he stayed in his flow. He didn't try to become some CEO in a suit shaking hands at board meetings. He knew what he was good at, the code, and he built a life that protected that skill.
He optimized for his own strengths, which is a perfect segue because a lot of people are probably thinking, okay, sure, he's a coder. Of course he likes silence.
Fair point. But this exact same pattern shows up in fields that are, all about performance.
Which brings us to case study number 2, Glenn Gould.
The Canadian pianist. Now, this is a guy who is at the absolute top of the classical music world. They called him a magician on the keys. People worshipped him.
But Glenn saw the audience very, very differently. The quotes in our source material are actually pretty dark. He didn't just have stage fright. He seemed to genuinely hate performing live.
He called concerts a tawdry circus.
A tawdry circus. And he went even further. He said the audience was a force of evil.
Which sounds so dramatic until you understand his psychology. Gould was a perfectionist. For him, music was this precise, almost spiritual art form.
But in a concert hall, with people coughing and shuffling around,
he felt they weren't there for the art. He felt they were there for the spectacle, just waiting for him to make a mistake so they could judge him like a gladiator.
So in 1964, at age 31, the absolute prime of his career, he just quits.
Walks away from the stage. Forever.
And never gave another live concert.
He retreated into the recording studio and never came out.
And the studio is basically the musical version of Linus's green room.
It is. It's a completely controlled environment. Gould could record the same note 100 times if he wanted to. He could splice takes together. He could engineer the perfect performance without the noise of an audience.
So both of these guys, Linus and Glenn, they're outliers. But I think a lot of people listening can relate to that feeling, that desire to just shut the door.
Yeah.
But we usually feel guilty about it.
We do. We feel like we're broken or antisocial. We worry that we're failing at being human.
So help us understand the why behind this. You mentioned a framework, self-determination theory, or SDT. What is that?
SDT is one of the most solid theories in psychology. It basically says that for a human to feel psychologically well, they need 3 things. Think of them as 3 buckets that need to be full: autonomy, competence, and connection.
Okay. Autonomy, competence, connection.
Got it. If you're low on any one of those, you feel distress. And this theory explains exactly why forced socializing can be so draining and why solitude can be so restorative.
Okay, let's break them down. Start with autonomy.
Autonomy is the feeling that you are the author of your own actions. You're doing something because you choose to, not because you're being pressured or controlled.
There's a study in the notes here about blood donation that just illustrates this perfectly.
Yes, the classic blood donation study. So, researchers found that when you ask people to donate blood out of simple goodwill, you get a certain number of volunteers. They feel good. It's their choice to help.
Right, an altruistic choice.
But then the researchers tried offering a small reward, $5 to donate. And participation actually went down.
Wait, that makes zero economic sense. You pay people, more should show up.
But psychologically, it makes total sense. The $5 changed the motivation. It went from, I am choosing to help, to, I am being paid for a service. The external bribes stripped away their internal autonomy.
They lost that feeling of doing it for themselves.
Exactly. Now, apply that to a Friday night party you really don't want to go to.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
It's the end of a long week, you're tired, but your friends drag you out to a loud bar. The music is pounding. You're physically there, but are you there by choice?
No. You're there because of peer pressure, social obligation.
Right. So your autonomy bucket is empty. You're essentially a social hostage. That's why it's so draining. It's not just the noise, it's the complete lack of control.
That makes so much sense. That's why forced fun is the actual worst. Okay, so what about the second pillar? Competence.
Competence is the need to feel capable, like you're good at something and making progress. And this is where the green room becomes a superpower.
Because in real life, you're just constantly being interrupted.
Right. Think about that loud bar again. Can you do any deep work? Can you solve a complex problem?
No, you're just trying to hear the person next to you. You're just surviving.
Your competence meter is at 0. But then you go home. You close the door, you sit in the silence, and suddenly you remember a project you were working on.
And you get that second wind.
You open your laptop, you start writing or coding, whatever it is, and you're flying. You are exercising your competence. For people like Linus, that isolation isn't about hiding. It's about creating a space where they can actually be their best selves.
That's a great reframe. It's not, I hate people. It's, I love being competent, and I can't do that with all this noise.
Exactly. Linus's boring office was a machine designed for competence.
Okay, but then we have the third pillar, which feels like the tricky one, connection.
Yeah.
Humans are social animals. We can't just live in caves.
Right, and that's the mistake we make. We think connection means constant physical presence. We think you have to be at the party to feel connected. But SDT shows what we really need is the security of connection.
Okay, so give me an example. What does that look like?
All right, picture it's 1 in the morning. You've been working alone, you're in the zone, feeling great, but you get that little feeling of, I wonder how my friend is doing.
Sure.
So you send a quick text or a voice note. Just, hey, hope you're good. Coffee next week. And your friend texts back, sounds great.
Simple.
That 10-second exchange just filled your connection bucket. You know they're there. You know you're supported. But, and this is the key, you initiated it. You controlled the terms.
So you kept your autonomy intact while getting your connection.
You got it. You don't need 3 hours of small talk. You just need that reliable touch point.
This explains so much about why things like texting or Discord are so huge for introverts. It's connection without surrendering your autonomy.
It's high connection, low pressure. It lets you maintain relationships without totally draining your battery.
But I want to play devil's advocate for a second. Is there a danger here? Because we're making this sound pretty great. When does solitude become unhealthy isolation?
That's the critical question. And the research from 2020 during the pandemic lockdowns gave us a very clear answer. The difference between healthy solitude and damaging isolation is one word: choice.
Choice.
When you are forced into isolation like a lockdown, or if you have anxiety that stops you from leaving the house, it's incredibly damaging. It destroys your autonomy. You feel trapped. And that leads to stress, confusion, anger.
So if you're staying home because you're terrified of the world, that's a problem.
Yes, that's dysfunction. But if you are staying home because you are choosing to prioritize your work or your peace or your need to recharge, that's healthy. That is self-determined.
It really all comes down to who's holding the remote control.
That is the perfect way to put it. Linus Torvalds and Glenn Gould held the remote. They weren't hiding from the world, they were curating it.
So if we're looking at listeners now who might feel guilty for skipping that networking event, what's the takeaway?
The takeaway is to stop trying to force yourself into a mold that destroys your autonomy and competence. You don't have to be the life of the party to be successful or happy.
It's basically a permission slip.
It is. If you need a green room to do your best work, bill your green room. If you need to communicate via email to keep your sanity, then do it.
Because the results speak for themselves. You can absolutely change the world from a quiet room.
Sometimes that's the only way the world gets changed. If Linus had been busy at tech mixers, we wouldn't have Linux. If Gould had kept touring, we wouldn't have those perfect recordings.
They protected their space. And in the end, we all benefited.
Exactly.
I love that. It makes me think, we live in this attention economy where everyone is just shouting to be heard. Maybe the real power move isn't being the loudest voice in the room.
No, it's being the one who has the focus to actually build something that matters.
And you usually figure out what matters when the door's closed.
When all the noise stops, the real signal comes through. That's where you find out who you really are when nobody's watching.